Throughout my time looking at the certain spheres I am in around the internet concerning the people who I often watch and make videos on, often do I think of the freak shows that were prevalent throughout the 1800s, where people would come from afar to see these people who could entertain them and show them how much different people's lives are compared to them. Nowadays, neither the effort nor money is required to witness spectacles of this nature. Although saying that, that's not quite true, considering the people we have all seen on the internet, with this being a massive difference with a lot of what these people in these freak shows are. What we would call normal now was once a rarity a couple hundred years ago, with what we consider minor disabilities being a large spectacle for the average person, including things so innocuous such as those who are extremely obese and people such as dwarves. Whilst many of these people, due to their challenges, had to go into these freak shows and became a spectacle just to survive, some of these people were often just oddities of the times and were forced to make themselves spectacles, and this is certainly the case with the subject of today's video, Daniel Lambert. Unlike a lot of people that I've covered on my channel, Daniel was actually born in quite a high standing, especially due to his father, also named Daniel, who was once the huntsman to the 4th Earl of Stamford, where he would organise and operate the fox hunting activities, playing a large role and clearly being a significant figure. Further to this, his father was the keeper of the Leicester jail, spelt Gaol because it old in it. Despite what Daniel looks like, he was actually a keen sportsman, having a large amount of interest in swimming and being very proficient, so much so he taught locals how to swim. In addition to this, he would hunt otters, fish, take part in shooting and horse racing, as well as breeding dogs, showing his level of intellect as well as how privileged his upbringing was. When Daniel was 14, he set off by himself to Birmingham, apprenticing at an engraving and die casting works, although when he was an adult he had to return to Leicester due to the business shutting down, and would soon become the assistant to his father at the Leicester jail, and soon afterwards became the jail keeper himself due to his father retiring. When he was jail keeper, he made a very good impression, assisting many of the prisoners when he could. However, throughout his time at the jail, he was consistently gaining weight, being 32 stone at around the age of 23 and around 40 stone at the age of 31. This weight gain would restrict him, especially with hunting, although it wouldn't restrict him anywhere near as you may think, walking and swimming like he used to, equipped with the ability to float with 2 men on his back, and was apparently able to kick high, Ethan Ralph style apparently. The most interesting of his feats was one time when he was watching a dancing bear, where his dog bit the bear, agitating it and attacking the dog, requiring Daniel to hit the bear with a pole and punching it in the head, knocking it to the ground. At the time, this must have probably been the event of a lifetime. Not only are you seeing a dancing bear, which is pretty cool anyway, you're seeing a nearly 6-foot man, which would have been tall anyway, but he's almost 50 stone at the same time, and he's fighting a fucking bear. A big scary furry killing machine, and he just bonks it on the head. Daniel's weight continued to grow. Despite the already immense weight he already was, he managed to grow even heavier, being an estimated 50 stone by the time he was 35, making him the fattest person at his time. This had a poor effect, obviously, when his jail was closed, and he was unable to find a new job due to his size. Although due to his good work at the jail, he was granted an annuity of £4,000 in today's money, although this was apparently not enough for Daniel, despite him allegedly having very few expenses. Daniel, realising his predicament, decided to move to London and allowed people to come and visit him in exchange for money. This was a success, having around 400 people show up per day, paying 1 shilling for entry, with him having to work, aka sit there for 5 hours a day and essentially have people gawk at him for a couple minutes at a time and speak to him. At one point he also met up with a dwarf by the name of Joseph Borowski. Probably got that wrong. An interesting man in himself, although in Daniel's story he was just a small man made to look even smaller by Daniel, which was a big curiosity to those who were lucky enough to see the two together in the short span of time they collaborated. Although whilst I described what so-called freaks would have to do with people just staring at them as a strange almost being, that wasn't actually the case with Daniel, as being overweight was something at this point in time that was actually quite an admirable trait and seemed to be quite positive. Thus, people weren't just coming to laugh at him, and were instead essentially coming to see him as a wonder. Despite this, the repetitive nature of this work, as well as his own anxieties, resulted in Daniel wanting to return to Leicester and stop showing himself off to people, and despite only having done this for a few months, from April to September of 1806, he had been so successful that he was wealthy again and could return to some of the things he had done in his youth. Through the next couple of years he toured only a couple more times whenever he needed the money, although it never seemed as though he struggled after spending his time in London. However, on the 21st of June 1808, on a standard day for Daniel, he began shaving. 10 minutes later, he was dead. As there was no autopsy, there was no clear cause of death, although it is likely it was a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot travelling from his leg to his lungs. He had to be buried quickly due to his body decomposing with only a couple of days. The wall of his apartment was destroyed so that his body could be removed, and he had to be made a specific coffin to fit his size, having wheels, and the grave required a slope in order for the pallbearers to not struggle to put the coffin in. Despite these precautions, it took half an hour for 20 men to lay the coffin into the grave, even with all the preparations that had been made. Daniel's story is a little bit strange and is in fact very tame in comparison to essentially everyone I've covered on this channel. However, it is similar in the fact that he made himself a public figure, although was never really a spectacle in the same way that people like Christian are. Daniel was very clearly a self-conscious man, and always claimed to never really eat food, claiming that from 1795 he only ever drank water. However, Daniel never really showed signs of any weight disorder, seeming to show that Daniel's form of weight gain was done solely through his lifestyle, eating large quantities of food and perhaps alcohol. Evidence that seems to be corroborated due to how much money he went through, even though he should have been pretty well off. It seems pretty clear to me that Daniel was incredibly uncomfortable with the situation he found himself in, and seemed to be ashamed of how he lived and what this did to him, especially due to it being something that had now defined him and had made him such a presence, something he would have understood due to him apparently visiting Joseph, the dwarf I mentioned earlier, during his days in Birmingham. After his death, a waxwork of him was displayed, although a fire destroyed the waxwork. However, some of his clothes do survive, being preserved in the Stamford Library, so some of his memory is still intact somewhere. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. In the description you'll find my second channel where some of my streams are clipped, as well as a very rare shitpost, as well as my Twitter. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.